Why problem gambling became a bigger problem during the pandemic and post pandemic. Santos Jr. here, 32 plus years. I've kicked it, I've crushed it. It's under my feet. I'll help, I'll support you do the same. Let's watch this video. It's got some really good commentary and some interesting facts. Join in.
Before my addiction, I had no credit card debt. I had one credit card. I had a savings account with money in it. After my addiction, I had 12 or 13 credit cards, $35,000 in credit card debt, no savings, and I cashed out 2 of my 401ks. My rock bottom kept getting lower and lower and lower. And I remember sitting at a slot machine and I had lost like $2,000 or $3,000 in an hour or an hour and a half.
Wow.
I remember sitting at that slot machine and thinking,
in an hour and a half.
Like, is this how the rest of my life is going to be?
You know, alcoholics don't think if I can just drink another fifth of vodka tonight, I'll be better. But the gambler thinks if I can just beg, borrow, or steal another $5,000 to replace that what I've lost, and rent is due tomorrow, you know, this is the only way I'm going to make that cash now, tonight, to keep gambling more.
I think the pandemic has had a very problematic effect on problem gamblers.
Problematic.
Because at the end of the day, when you're a problem gambler, usually what triggers you to gamble is any kind of negative emotion, despair, depression, loneliness, anxiety, and a pandemic exacerbates a lot of those emotions and feelings for people. I think if I was still active in my addiction during the pandemic, that would have been such an easy escape for me.
Andy Bellotti's story sadly isn't uncommon. But when you combine technology with the pandemic, it can make one struggle with addiction even worse. The past year has put our emotions through the ringer, and few of us have come out unscathed. But Andy is most worried about those who are becoming victims of their vices.
I think especially now during the pandemic, that people cannot travel or cannot maybe do the things that they once enjoyed.
Their vices.
They're looking for anything that serves as an escape or a source of enjoyment. And gambling, I think for many people, might be the thing they go to.
From the work that you do, have you noticed sort of an increase with people maybe struggling with problem gambling?
Anecdotally, we've heard a lot of concern during the pandemic from gamblers who feel like they may be at higher risk. You know, they're lonely, they're stressed, they're isolated. In some cases, they may have lost income. And these are all risk factors for developing gambling addiction. So gamblers themselves have been expressing that the pandemic for them may be a dangerous time.
What are some of the numbers looking like for just like gambling and people placing bets and betting right now?
It's been fascinating that during that pandemic, overall gambling participation declined steeply in the United States, but the amount of money wagered and the number of people wagering, which is no surprise as most casinos were closed and, you know, it's hard to go out and buy a lottery ticket. However, when you look at that overall participation trend, online gambling and mobile gambling and sports betting exploded during the pandemic.
For 2020, sports betting revenue was up about 70%.
We're seeing increases of hundreds of percent in online and mobile gambling. And now, of course, that sports are back, sports wagering is going through the roof.
Sports betting.
There are now more than 20 states who've legalized gambling on sports in the past 2 years. It's the largest and fastest expansion of gambling in our nation's history, all right during or as a consequence of the pandemic.
In some of the states that recently legalized digital sports books, nearly 90% of all sports bets were placed either online or through mobile devices. That's according to Sports Handle, a website that covers the sports betting world. And the American Gaming Association says there was a 6-month streak of consecutive all-time records of sports betting handle from August 2020 until February 2021.
March numbers still aren't in most of the country, but I think when all is said and done in the first quarter of 2021, both sports betting handle as well as revenue for the industry is going to be up about.
No wonder I've been getting
from 2019
with
messages
casinos and
about
everything that were
sports
closed
betting
a lot last year. How have you seen this industry sort of evolve when it comes to like mobile and online platforms for people to use?
One area it has kind of changed things a bit is when it comes to iGaming, which is kind of the online slots or blackjack games that are offered in just a handful of states. But what you saw in those states is that the iGaming revenue did increase pretty significantly last year. 2020 iGaming revenue was up 200%.
And during the pandemic, with fewer real-life opportunities available, screens have become the escape for many. And with gambling at one's fingertips, it can be a tough temptation to resist, especially for younger gamblers.
One of the risk factors for gambling on your mobile phone, besides the immediate access and besides the direct notifications, is the fact that most gambling companies now essentially have one-touch betting. So just like Amazon wants you to be able to order in one touch, so too do betting companies want you to be able to play in one touch. But what gamblers may not know is that the same way Amazon collects all your larger data to try and personalize and sell you a product that they think you really want, so too are gambling companies collecting all that data and targeting and tailoring their offers and sometimes even their games to the specific gambler. And so as these two things come together, the pandemic, the expansion of
it's a war
and new technology,
art of
it's
war.
going to create a storm for people at risk for gambling problems and for people who already have gambling problems.
I think that if you have an addictive personality or if you have a gambling addiction, the apps are just going to make it even worse. Because again, one of the things that really
Convenience.
facilitates gambling and gambling addiction is convenience. I'm not advocating for gambling to suddenly be made illegal in the same way that a lot of people have problems with alcohol, but other people can partake responsibly without a problem. And I don't think that we should close down all bars. But I do think there needs to be more regulation and legislation.
That is happening. There are steps being taken to increase the awareness of gambling addiction, regulating the industry, and getting help to people who need it.
Yeah.
Recently, FanDuel, one of the largest daily fantasy sports and online sportsbook platforms, announced a partnership with Gamban, a gambling blocking software.
As the industry rolls out sports betting in more states, they're certainly committed to making sure that it's rolled out in a responsible way. The AGA last year unveiled their
our children's are the one. There's a big in Kenya, Africa. There's a big pandemic with young children.
The industry spends hundreds of millions of dollars each year.
Our children are
and provide programming to problem gamblers.
The technology exists to be able to spot these patterns of play and maybe provide an intervention, a warning message, a suggested cooling off period, allowing a gambler to exclude, from their account.
When you're a problem gambler, when you're active in your addiction, you don't want to stop. I could see maybe that app being helpful for somebody who's in recovery and doesn't want to slip back into old habits. That could be helpful. But when I was active in my addiction, I would not have wanted to self-exclude. I would have found any excuse to play as much as possible.
With such easy access to online gambling, the question is, how can players avoid ending up addicted?
What are some of the signs that you can tell that maybe you have a gambling problem?
One of the things that makes gambling so difficult to work with is that we call it a hidden addiction, and that there were few outward physical signs like we've come to expect with other addictions.
Many times I would be gambling for 10, 12, 13-hour stretches, come back home to change my clothes, and then go to work. Because it was so easy to hide throughout the 5 years, it just got increasingly worse.
Why do you think some people don't seek help or think I don't have a problem?
Like many addictions, you do have that narrowing of your focus where the addiction, the behavior becomes sort of all-consuming, and it's hard to see outside yourself. It's hard to see the damage that you're doing to loved ones and your job and your family and things like that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that makes gambling addiction maybe uniquely difficult is that, especially for games of skill like sports betting, the gambler may think they're always one bet away from making everything better.
From what you've learned, what would be your advice to someone that has a gambling problem?
I tried countless times stuff on my own, self-help books, meditation, but I wasn't dealing with the root issue. And that's what a 12-step program does. So I would say if you truly think you have a problem,
that's where we need to
go
get
to a 12-step program.
The root.
And give it at least 30 days. Don't try to, on top of everything else, burden yourself with having to fix this problem on your own. I learned that I wasn't alone. That was the main thing. For so long, I thought, there's no way I can beat this. There's no way I can climb out of this hole. And here I am, 3 years and 4 months almost later, and my life is so much better. It's not that it's perfect, but I always say my worst day in recovery is better than my best day when I was active in my addiction.
National Problem Gambling Hotline, 800-522-4700. All right, that's all I have for this broadcast, this short video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned something from it. Most importantly, if there's something that I can do to support you as you support me, let's work together. Let's team up and see what we can make happen for your new journey. I'll see you on the next one at the top on the inside. Remember to Soldier Scribe if you're not, and turn your notifications to all. Leave a comment, a thumbs up, and I will respond. If you have a question, reach out to me right there.